He is my son, even if we don't share a single drop of blood. I'm not his biological father, but I'm the one who held him through feverish nights, the one who begged the court to give him a chance at life before his own mother tried to sell her child's kidney. Today's story isn't just about a custody battle. It's the journey of a man, no relation, no blood ties, who fought like a real father. To save a child, the whole world had already turned its back on. Why? Because he believed I loved this boy more than his own mother ever could. A custody case gone off the rails. A twist that will make you question everything. Who was truly the cruel one? And what you're about to hear might just challenge your entire definition of family. Stay until the end, because the final words of that little boy left the entire courtroom in tears. And you just might not be able to hold yours back either. Ethan Walker, 37 years old, lived alone in a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. He worked as an HVAC repairman, a stable, quiet job. Enough to get by, but nothing extravagant. His life passed in the solitude he had grown used to ever since losing both of his parents at a young age. Until one March evening, when heavy rain poured down over the front steps of his apartment, and Samantha appeared. She stood at his door, drenched heavily, pregnant, her eyes a mix of desperation and cold detachment. His ex-girlfriend from college, the one who had left without a word, no text, no call, 7 months pregnant, no family, no friends, beaten by her partner, disowned by her parents. Samantha didn't say much, but she didn't have to. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned, opened the door. No blame, no questions, just one simple act. He quietly cleared the small bed to welcome her and the unborn child she carried. From that moment on, Ethan no longer lived alone. But what he didn't know was that her return would change his life forever. Noah was born on a cold, rainy morning. No hospital, no doctors. Just one man with no blood relation trembling as he held the hands of the woman who once abandoned him and caught the newborn with eyes still wet from birth. From that moment on, Ethan knew his life had changed. What he didn't expect was how lonely that change would be. Just weeks after giving birth, Samantha began to drift away from motherhood. She slept all day, ignoring the cries that echoed through the night. She went out constantly dressed to the nines, full makeup heels clicking into the early morning hours. Whenever a message came through, she flinched, hid her phone behind her back, her eyes always darting away. Meanwhile, Ethan, a man who had never imagined himself as a father, became Noah's everything. He learned how to change diapers through YouTube tutorials. He mixed formula with a heart full of love. He calmed the baby's first fever with a shaky lullaby. Every night, as Noah drifted off to sleep on his chest, Ethan would whisper, "Daddy's here, and I'm not going anywhere." Even though deep down he knew, the one to leave wouldn't be Samantha, it would be the child. But in Ethan's heart, that baby was his son, his whole world. Samantha grew more distant by the day. She was no longer the exhausted, fragile woman from pregnancy, the one who needed shelter. Now she spent her days scrolling through her phone, her nights disappearing without a word. She barely acknowledged Noah and at times seemed irritated by his cries in the middle of the night. Ethan tried to hold things together. He quietly did everything, clinging to the fragile hope that maybe things would get better. But the small losses began to pile up. First, it was the laptop he used to take on jobs. Then the old watch his father had passed down. And one day, he discovered his mother's wedding ring, the only keepsake he'd kept after the funeral, was gone from the wooden box, where it had been hidden for years. When he asked Samantha, she simply shrugged. "I sold it. We needed the money." Ethan didn't argue, didn't shout. He just walked silently into the bedroom and sat next to Noah's crib for the entire night, without saying a single word. The next morning, he left for work as usual. Noah was still asleep, peaceful. Ethan kissed his forehead, gently closed the door, not knowing. It would be the last time he'd see his son there. That evening, the apartment was eerily silent. The door was slightly ajar. No lights were on. The room had been ransacked. The closet empty. His wallet, backup phone, even the stored formula all gone. No message. No note. No trace of Samantha. But on the cold floor, the old laundry basket lined with a towel was still there. And inside was Noah. Curled up, his cheeks ice cold. Tiny hands clutched around a damp towel. No bottle. No arms to hold him. No one to soothe him. Ethan dropped to his knees. With trembling hands, he scooped the baby into his chest. He held him tightly, burying his face into that tiny head of hair. And right then, for the first time in over 20 years, a tear fell. He hadn't cried since losing his parents. But now, with this child who shared no blood with him, Ethan's heart broke. You don't have anyone, and neither do I. So from now on, we have each other. Okay, Noah. From the moment Ethan knelt down to hold Noah in that cold, empty room, he knew his life had turned a new page. He didn't need a DNA test, didn't need a court's permission. To Ethan, that little boy was his son, his everything. The family he thought he'd lost long ago. For the next 3 years, Ethan lived a quiet, simple life filled with love. He walked Noah to preschool every morning, packed his lunch by hand, learned how to tie tiny shoelaces, read bedtime stories each night, and patiently answered every question about the world, from why rainbows exist to why leaves fall in autumn. Noah grew up healthy and kind, always calling Ethan Dad with pride in his eyes. He never asked about the mother who left him, and Ethan never brought her up. He didn't want the past to stain his child's innocence. Though money was often tight, Ethan never complained. He picked up weekend shifts, took late-night repair jobs, all to buy Noah his favorite toy or new shoes. He turned down every date, ignored every setup, because the greatest love of his life already lived in that tiny home with him. Until one fateful afternoon, Ethan came home after a long shift holding the toy he'd promised Noah for doing well in art class. But the moment he reached the door, something felt wrong. The lock had been pried open, the door slightly ajar. He stepped inside and his heart stopped. The house was eerily quiet, furniture in disarray. Noah's little backpack was gone. His half-finished milk still sat on the table. No laughter. No little voice calling Daddy like always. Ethan rushed to the neighbors. One of them pointed toward the doorbell camera. About an hour ago, a woman took the boy. She looked like his mom. Ethan replayed the footage, hands trembling. Samantha. Her curly hair now dyed bright blonde. Wearing expensive clothes, dark sunglasses, she picked Noah up without hesitation, carried him to a shiny black SUV. A strange man sat in the driver's seat, laughing. No note, no warning, no paperwork. She vanished from Ethan's life once again. But this time, she took his heart with her. Ethan collapsed onto the front steps, still holding the toy he never got to give Noah. And for the second time in his life, the man wept. But this time, it wasn't just sorrow. It was fear. Had he just lost his son forever? And more terrifying, was Noah even safe? Ethan called the police the very night Noah was taken. He presented everything, the security footage, details about Samantha, even the name of the man who had been with her. He handed over every piece of evidence he had, photos, old messages, images of Noah growing up month by month. But the officer on duty simply shook his head. "We're sorry, sir, but you don't have any legal rights to the child." Ethan stood frozen. "I raised him from birth. I'm the one who rocks him to sleep every night. I'm his dad." The officer didn't argue, but the law was clear. Noah didn't carry Ethan's last name. There was no birth certificate with his name on it, no adoption papers, Legally, he was nothing more than an unofficial babysitter. Ethan returned to the empty apartment and grabbed the tiny shirt that still smelled like Noah's milk. He sat on the bed, unable to eat, unable to sleep, unable to breathe from the pain crushing his chest. 2 months passed, not a single word. Ethan printed hundreds of flyers, posted across missing persons forums, wandered through low-rent motels where Samantha used to stay. He even borrowed money to hire a private investigator. Every night he lay awake asking himself, is Noah cold? Is he getting enough to eat? Is someone singing him to sleep? He tried to picture Noah living a normal life, but his heart always screamed something far worse. Then one afternoon, in the middle of a heavy rainstorm, Ethan's phone rang. An unknown number. Ethan. It's me, Laura, the nurse from the old clinic where you brought Noah for his vaccines. Do you remember me? Ethan jumped up, his heart pounding. I think I just saw Noah. She explained that during her morning shift, a woman brought in a little boy with a badly swollen arm. The child didn't cry, didn't speak. He just sat silently like a shadow, lifeless eyes, hands wrapped tightly around his stomach. Laura felt something familiar. When she asked the boy his name, he whispered, Noah. Then she looked closer and saw the small scar behind his right ear, the one he got after falling down the stairs when he was 2. His arm is broken, Ethan. Broken. And the woman with him, she didn't seem like a mother. She was cold, irritated whenever he moved. The boy looked terrified, like he'd been locked up for a long time. Ethan's knees buckled, his vision blurred. Then Laura whispered, I know there's not much I can do, but I needed you to know he's still alive. And I think he needs you now more than ever. The call ended. Ethan sat motionless for a long time. Outside, the rain kept falling, but inside Ethan a storm had just begun. Noah wasn't just taken. He was being broken, body and soul. And this time, Ethan wasn't going to lose him again. Tomorrow he'd call a lawyer. Even if he had to fight the whole world, he would bring that child home, no matter the cost. The next morning, Ethan walked into the law office with dark circles under his eyes and a thick folder he had protected for the past 3 years. Inside, it was everything he had. Photos of Noah from the moment he was born to his earliest milestones, taking his first steps, celebrating his first birthday, hugging Ethan during preschool festivals. Receipts for hospital visits, formula vaccinations, clinic documents. Messages between him and Samantha throughout the pregnancy, clearly showing how he cared for both mother and child. The lawyer's name was Claire, a tough middle-aged woman who had once worked in child protection services. After hearing the entire story, she stared at Ethan for a long time, then said, I'll take the case. But you need to know, the chances of winning are extremely slim. Ethan nodded. I don't need a victory. I just need a chance to save my son. The legal battle began that very week. Claire filed a petition requesting temporary custody for Ethan, based on the imminent danger to Noah's life. She also filed for a restraining order against Samantha and began gathering evidence. While digging through online leads, Claire and her team uncovered something chilling, almost unbelievable. An anonymous account on the dark web had once posted in an illegal organ trading forum. The post was a short, horrifying ad: kidney. Male child. 4 years old. Healthy. Quiet. Discreet delivery. Need fast cash. The timing, location, and encrypted contact number matched data Samantha had previously used on various gambling accounts. When Ethan heard this, his body went cold. She was going to sell Noah's kidney. Claire gripped his hand tightly. This isn't just a custody case anymore, Ethan. This is a rescue mission. Ethan began cooperating with cybercrime investigators, Police uncovered a string of messages between Samantha and a foreign man discussing the logistics of a delivery through a private hospital near the border. Noah, just 4 years old, had been reduced to a commodity traded for spending money. When Ethan was handed the chat logs, he sat silently in his chair. He trembled as he picked up a photo of Noah, the wide-eyed little boy with an innocent smile who still had no idea he'd nearly been betrayed by the very person who gave him life. No, I won't let that happen. Even if it kills me, I won't let them take my son again. The legal war had only just begun. But this time, Ethan wasn't just a powerless father. He had the law, he had the evidence, he had the truth. And most of all, he had love, the one thing Samantha never truly had. The courtroom was packed that day, the air tight as a drawn wire. Samantha arrived in an expensive dress, her hair perfectly styled, nails painted a glossy red. She didn't look at Ethan, didn't seem worried. She simply crossed her legs, tapping her fingers on the table like she was waiting for a coffee, not a hearing that would decide the fate of a child. Ethan was different. He sat still, eyes locked on the courtroom door. Beside him was Claire, his lawyer. In his hand, he gripped an old handkerchief, the one Noah used to cuddle when he slept. The judge entered. The hearing began. Samantha spoke first. "Your Honor," she said, voice flat, "I am the biological mother. I have legal rights." She pointed toward Ethan. "Is just a stranger claiming to be the father." Claire stood. "That man has raised the child for 3 years. He's the only one who cared for him, protected him, and kept him safe from the cruelty of the defendant." Samantha let out a dry laugh. "He's my child. He has nothing to do with that man. I gave birth to him. If I want to take him, that's my right." Ethan clenched his fists, his eyes bloodshot, but he stayed silent, waiting for the right moment. Claire gave a signal. A technician walked in and pressed play. The recording echoed through the courtroom, soft at first, then louder, like a knife cutting through every heart in the room. "Daddy, I'm scared." A trembling voice, the voice of a child barely over 4, faint, choked, but every word clear. "Mommy said I can't eat. She said if I'm good, she won't sell me." Gasps and muffled sobs filled the room. Someone covered their mouth. Someone else quietly wiped away tears. The boy's voice continued, piercing through the silence like needles to the heart. "I don't want to go with Mommy. She locked me in a dark room. I'm hungry. I'm scared. I miss Daddy." Ethan lowered his head, tears spilling onto his trembling hands. Claire placed a firm, steadying hand on his shoulder. Then the boy said one last thing. The sentence that brought the entire courtroom to a complete shattering silence. "Daddy, if Mommy doesn't catch me tomorrow, will you come get me? I only have you. I don't want Mommy. I just want you." A chill swept the room. Samantha no longer smiled. Her face had gone pale. Her hands fidgeted. Her eyes darted. The judge looked up, staring straight at her. "Do you have a response?" Samantha could only whisper. "He's my son." Claire stood. "Yes. But being a mother is not just giving birth. It's not leaving your child alone on a cold floor. It's not selling your child's kidney on the dark web. And it is absolutely not making a 4-year-old beg not to go home with you." Ethan finally rose. His voice trembled. "I don't share his blood, but I've stayed up every night when he had a fever. I've gone hungry so he could have formula. I've held him close when he cried, whispering, 'Daddy's here.' I won't leave." He turned to the judge, eyes full of tears. "I don't need a title. I don't need to be called his father. I just want him to live, to be loved, to be safe. Please, let him come home." The judge gave a small, solemn nod. He didn't need to hear anything else. The ruling was made. The courtroom doors closed behind him. Ethan stood there for a long moment, frozen, as if he couldn't quite believe it was over. That the battle he'd fought for 3 long years had finally ended. The court had ruled. He was granted full custody of Noah. And Samantha, the woman who once called herself a mother, was taken into custody on multiple charges: child abuse, attempted organ trafficking, and permanent termination of all parental rights. Ethan said nothing. He simply hurried out to the car where Claire, the lawyer who never left his side, was waiting on the steps, holding the hand of a tiny boy. Noah saw him. And like a lightning bolt, he ran his little feet pounding against the pavement and threw himself into the only arms that had ever made him feel safe. Ethan held him tight, so tight, as if letting go might make him disappear all over again. On the drive home, neither of them spoke. Just the sound of wind brushing against the windows, and the soft rustle of a stuffed bear in the back seat. Then suddenly, a small voice broke the silence, timid, unsure, as if afraid of the answer. "Daddy, do I have to go with Mommy again? Do I have to be away from you?" Ethan almost couldn't speak. He pulled over, turned to the back seat, and took those tiny hands into his. "No, never again." Noah nodded, his eyes brimming with tears. "Then, please don't let anyone take me away again. I'm scared. I just want to stay with you." Ethan took a deep breath, his voice trembling with emotion. "I promise, Noah. I will never let anyone take you again. You don't have to be afraid anymore. Because from now on, you'll always be home. With me." In that moment, on a quiet roadside wrapped in wind, a little boy who had once been abandoned finally found his way home. And a man with no blood, ties, no official title finally, truly became a father. Ethan never fathered Noah. No shared blood, no birth certificate, no legal tie between them, except love. But it was that very love, unrecognized by the law, unnamed by society, that kept that little boy alive. Not because Ethan was his biological father, but because he chose to love, chose to stay, and never gave up. Some people give you life, but never protect it. Others share no blood, but would sacrifice everything just to call you family. True love doesn't need a birth certificate, just a heart that refuses to walk away when you need it most. What about you? Who do you believe truly deserves to be called family if you were Noah? Who would you choose? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. And who knows, maybe the story you share could be the light someone else is searching for.